One of my heroes who was forged by discipleship is Pope John Paul II. He did not have an easy life growing up. Before he was even born, his big sister died. His mom died when he was only 8. 4 years after his mom died, his big brother died. When he was a teenager, Nazis took over his country. And shortly thereafter, communists took over his country. And when he was 20, his dad, who had become his friend, his mentor, who had filled the role of a mom in his life, his dad died when he was only 20 years old. He later, reflecting on his childhood, said, "Before I was 21, I lost everybody I loved." And people described him in 6th and 7th grade as being kind of withdrawn and quiet. So quick side note, if you were kind of a depressed preteen, you might be Pope someday. When you think about his life and how rough he had it, I don't know, man, you might think, man, I've had it really rough. You know what, though? It probably wasn't as rough as John Paul II. So maybe you have, in fairness. I don't know what you've been through. But I'll tell you what, heroism, heroic souls, it's an unfortunate reality about life. They're only chiseled out from the rest by really tough circumstances. When rough things happen to you, you either get bitter or you get better. And John Paul II, you see how he forged his soul and the path he chose in life? He truly became heroic. And this man who went through so much suffering as a young man, as a teenager, he wasn't renowned for his bitterness. He wasn't renowned for being a guy who was hard, knew how to get through things. He was renowned for his gentleness. He was renowned for his love. The guy loved everybody with like this superhuman, amazing love. He even loved the guy who shot him at point blank range. By the way, after he was shot, he was convinced he was going to die. And he was being carted off really fast to the hospital, bleeding everywhere. He had 3 words to say. And what would you have said after you were shot? Don't say it. All he had to say was, "Mary, my mother. Mary, my mother." He later said one hand shot the bullet, another guided it. You know where the bullet is now? It's in the Crown of Mary statue in Fatima, Portugal. He met the guy who shot him, he forgave him, and it changed that guy's life. He became friends with the Pope and came to a relationship with God. Guys, the impact that John Paul II had on every life that he came in contact with, the impact he had on an entire generation of Catholics and on this whole world, man, it's difficult to measure. He raised up a generation of dynamic Catholics who were proud of their faith. He had a central role in toppling communism in Eastern Europe because of his support of something called the Solidarity Movement. Without a shot being fired, after decades of oppression, communism topples like a bunch of dominoes. This is no ordinary man. This man had an amazing impact on the world. At the heart of what formed John Paul II into the amazing man that he was discipleship. When he was a teenager, there was a tailor from his parish named Jan Taranowski who started discipleship groups at his parish of just 10 to 15 young people who would get together, pray the rosary, and learn how to follow Jesus together. And he placed a teenage leader over each discipleship group. And he gave special attention to that leader, mentored that person, and formed them in Christ. 10 of those leaders ended up becoming priests. And the first one who became a priest was Kara Wojtyła, who became John Paul II. See, John Paul II, he couldn't have become the tremendous man he was all by himself. He was part of a discipleship group. He was forged by fellowship with other people. But by accountability from his friends who would call him on to do the right thing. He was forged by mentorship from Jan Taranowski, the tailor at his parish. And they all followed Jesus together and learned to live life to the full together and learned to share a mission for Jesus. Those are the things that John Paul II was transformed by as a young man, and that made him the kind of person that changed the world around him. Discipleship. It's about living a life to the full. It's so explosive. It impacts the world around you. Guys, holiness, it's not that complex. It doesn't mean you have to become a priest or a nun. I mean, God might call you to that, and if He does, listen. But through discipleship, you might find that Jesus is calling you just to be a tailor who starts discipleship groups at your parish. Or maybe He'll call you to be the next John Paul II. But either way, this is about learning to live life to the full. It's about becoming saint, insert your name here. Now, of course, you don't have to answer that call. You don't have to become the next John Paul II. And you don't even have to become the next Jan Taranowski. You could be as average and ordinary as you want. and you can live as mediocre a life as you want. But Jesus is inviting us to life to the full. And I have a feeling you want that. So we've been talking about discipleship, and some people might be thinking, that sounds great, but I got so much other stuff going on in my life. Like, I know you're busy, and I'm not just saying this facetiously. Teenagers today might be some of the busiest in history. Not necessarily with all really important things, but there's a whole lot of things that are competing for your time. But you know that you make time for the things that are really important to you. I mean, if someone you have a crush on asks you to hang out and go on a date somewhere, you're not going to be like, no, I'm busy playing Xbox this weekend, right? You put things that are important to you first, and you make time for them. C.S. Lewis, famous Christian writer, he said, put first things first, and you get second things thrown in. Put second things first, you lose both first and second things. What's he talking about? He's saying put the first things first, meaning the things that are really the most important things in life. Life is full of a bunch of second things that could take up so much of our time that we forget what's really important. And it takes discipline to do that, doesn't it? With all this stuff going on in our lives, it takes discipline to put the most important things in life first. You'll notice that the word discipline and disciple have the same root. There's a reason for that. It's because it takes discipline to be a disciple. In the words of St. Benedict, you can't even begin your ascent toward God without discipline. Now, what are some of the second things in the life of a teenager? That could be anything. It could be anything from Xbox to a sports team to social networking that you have to keep up on with your million friends on Facebook. See, and that stuff's fine. I mean, none of that stuff is a sin. I'm not here condemning all that stuff. And in fact, some of that stuff can be good if you don't let all those things take the place of the first things. See, if you want to succeed in life, not just at the stuff you do, but at the kind of person you become, you have to make time for first things. You have to keep first things first. You got to make time for your formation as a person. You have to make time for discipleship. And why is it so important to also do this with an adult who's mentoring your group, who's an example to you guys? Real simple, because you need role models to lead you. You need role models to give you a vision of the kind of person you want to become. Listen, everybody needs that, guys, even as adults. Pope Benedict XVI, he wrote in Spe Salve, he wrote that life is like a voyage on the sea of history, often dark and stormy. A voyage in which we watch for the stars that indicate the route. You see, in the old days, ships would steer themselves with stars as their navigation. And he wrote, the true stars of our life are the people who have lived good lives. They are lights of hope. In a dark and stormy period of his life as a young man, John Paul II had Jan Taranowski as a light of hope. Who's your light of hope in your life? After Jesus asked the question, what are you looking for? In the Gospel of John, St. Andrew, who was walking behind him, was probably kind of stunned, and he just said, where are you staying? Jesus' reply to Andrew was really simple. He said, come and see. He wasn't forcing himself on anybody. He was inviting. I think he extends that same invitation to you right now. He's inviting you to come and see what this is all about. See, no one can force this on you. No one can force you to discipleship. You might be thinking, yeah, I'm here because my parents forced me to come. You don't know what you're talking about. But you know as a teenager how to wear your parents down. And if you really don't want to be here, after a while they're going to give up the fight. Look, you have to come and check this out for it to have the effect in your life that Jesus wants it to have. But it doesn't matter how much great stuff God has in mind for you and how he wants to transform your life and help you live life to the full. You're not going to experience any of that if you don't make time for this, if you don't show up. And not only that, but you have a responsibility to the people around you who are also called to that life to the full. You see, because if half the group doesn't show up every time, this is not happening. No one's making you do this, but the invitation is there. to come and see. If you do come every time, if you come with an open mind, with an open heart, if you're a part of forming that atmosphere where people are going to discover the call of Jesus in their lives, where people feel safe being themselves, yeah, no negative humor or anything like that. If you're part of that, not only are you going to see amazing transformation in yourself and learn ever more what it means to live life to the full, you're going to have the joy of being part of the transformation of the people around you. What are you looking for? You got to come and see to find it.